interested to see what the regulations are with that. Right now, only one manufacturer, Aston Martin, has confirmed that they are looking at a hypercar program for 2021. So it'll be very curious to see what the strategy are and where they go with these things, because it could get very interesting as far as, the top classifications. And keep in mind, looking ahead to 2020, we already know Ford's factory GT program is not going to be back. There's a good chance BMW will not be at Le Mans next year. So that's two manufacturers they lose in GT potentially. Now, granted, we could see other cars there in privateer mode, but ultimately the factory play thing is going to get limited. And when you're trying to fill a 62-car field, trying to find entries could get a little more difficult as far as quality entries in the field. I mean, there are, for instance, with the FIA Super Season for this upcoming year, starts in September, there are 4 teams that have never competed at Le Mans before, but since they're going to be a regular in FIWEC, they get an automatic berth in the field. So it could get a little bit interesting to see how this plays out and how they fill the rest of the cars with teams that, these one-off teams that just run. I mean, we only had one of those, for instance, this year with Ben Keating that got into the field. So I'll be very curious to see how they fill the field or what the makeup is with the selection committee when we get to March of next year or February, wherever they reveal the field, as to who gets in and who does not get an invite into the field.
We're talking with Matthew Embury, our official IndyCar contributor. Matthew, it's been 34 days, I believe. It's been, like 34 days since the car is fired for the first practice of the IndyCar Grand Prix. Obviously, we saw Simon Pageant sweep the IndyCar series in Indy. Certainly, Joseph Newgarden reestablished himself as a championship leader by a big win in Detroit. Scott Dixon got himself back into the winning in second in Detroit, if you will. Tomoko Soto rallied for a podium finish. We'll talk about him and Graham Rahal incident here in just a minute. Alexander Rossi finished second. Alexander Rossi also shaping up to be a championship caliber team. Those are just some of the highlights and bullet points of IndyCar. So let's talk a little bit about what we've seen in IndyCar over the last few weeks. And let's talk about what's going forward. And certainly want to talk about that race last week in Texas.
Well, thankfully we got through Texas without too many dramas. That event always scares me because, with the cars with the exposed wheels and the speeds they're running at now, you're worried about eventually the scenarios that happened that led to the cancellation of the kart race in 2001. The cars are going too fast, the drivers, the G-loads, there's too much for the drivers are getting knocked out. Thankfully, we're not to that point, at least not yet, but that's an event that, because of that fact, that these cars look so much like the kart cars that got sent home in 2001. I'm starting to wonder when and how much longer this Texas race is going to go, because it's on a high bank track where there are very few straightaways, so the cars are not running straight like they do at Indianapolis, and you don't have time to, get a little bit of a break from that G-load. So I got to say, I'm more concerned than ever that and hopefully this windscreen will fix that problem a little bit. But I got to say, the G-loads are going to start getting high again. I'm starting to wonder, are we going to have some issues with Texas and the drivers being able to, function properly to be able to handle an event like this? I mean, 600 kilometers is a long distance to be putting your body through that kind of stress.
Let's talk a little bit about Connor Daly and his solid performance in Texas. Connor Daly believes that his latest audition in the NTT IndyCar Series went well, but certainly Connor Daly has had his struggles, and I like him. He's a good guy. He's a good driver. He just hasn't got that break yet, and I don't know that he's going to get many more chances to make that happen, so he's got to make the most of everything. I thought he did that in Texas.
He certainly did, obviously. Unfortunately, as we see, Max Chilton has decided to take the Mike Conway route with nerves about the danger on ovals. He is elected, looks like, to stop his running on ovals, which means he will probably not be a competitor at Indy for the 500 anymore, which is unfortunate considering he almost won the race 2 years ago, led the most laps. But that's his decision, and that's what he elects to do. And you can't necessarily whack him in the back of the head for, thinking about safety first in that scenario. So ultimately, you look at the scenarios right now. Connor certainly is showing that now he's figured out the ovals. They had a great run in Indianapolis, had a solid run, and not a spectacular run at Texas. And assuming they go with him for Iowa, Pocono, et cetera, at least 2 more chances for him to make some noise there. And I don't know if he would be into possibly taking a deal with Carlin for the ovals only for 2020 or not, but you have to wonder right now at this point if that's as good as it's going to get, because unfortunately there seems still to be, teams not necessarily as keen about taking him as a full-time driver as he did maybe a couple of years ago when he was driving with Coyne, which tells me he still has a ways to go before he is really in the talk for a full-time gig on the IndyCar Series, unless the grid expands very proportionately to closer to that, 30-car possibility.
Let's talk a little bit about Ray Hall and Ray Hall Racing and the Texas and with Sato
crew members. That's 2 races on ovals in a row where one of their crewmen have been hit. I mean, it happened with Jordan King at Indy, and then it happened with Sato. I mean, that is, I got to say, that's inexcusable for me that it not only for the same team, but at 2 events, almost the same incident. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and we've noticed that at Indy. Of course, I was at the Indy race, and you were too. But we noticed that that just it seemed like there was a lot of action, a lot of activity in the pits, and there was just a lot of out of control things in the pits in Indy, and we saw an incident in Detroit as well. What's going on in the pits?
Well, I think the issue is you see that how far inside the pit lane before they put that speed limit on. They need to force them to get on the limiter before they pass that attenuator at the head of the pit wall. They're letting them go way too deep. They're pushing way too hard. And let me say, that pit lane does not have the grip to drop your speed down as, say, the rest of the main track. I mean, it's not rubbered in like the rest of the track. And because of that, the possibility for incidents happening on that section of the course, like the ones we saw with Jordan King and then the incident that led to another caution flag on the pit lane as well during the race, those are going to continue to happen. I think they need to push it further out, maybe a commitment cone line just like NASCAR has, because I think they're letting them go way too deep into an area where it's not made for the cars to go that fast and then downshift and lower their speed down at a rapid rate to reach the speed limit from 200 down to 60.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were saying something else. No, you're absolutely right. So, I mean, it's just it's a dangerous spot to be. A lot of people don't realize how dangerous it is to be in those pits, and I think it's fun to walk through the pits.
Well, lower the speed limit. Well, it's already 60 miles an hour. I mean, what are you going to lower it down to? 30, 40? I mean, you really can't lower it anymore, I don't think.
Not with IndyCar, I don't think you could. Maybe you could get it down to 50, but it look at how hard it is to slow those down coming into the pits. I mean, you got to remember, this is a jet airline on the ground. You can't just go from 200 miles to 60 miles an hour in a matter of seconds on a full green caution, if you will. You just can't do that. So yeah, hopefully we'll get some things worked out there in the safety, because God forbid. I mean, I don't know if I have to check my facts on this. You might know better than I do, but I don't think anybody's ever gotten seriously hurt or killed in the pits as far as a pit crew member goes. I could be wrong about that. 1973.
Yeah,
so,
unfortunately, a signboard man was hit and killed when an ambulance went the wrong way up the pit lane and caught him by surprise, and the signboard man was hit and killed. But that was the last fatality that I know of.
So let's talk a little bit about coming up Road America in 8 days. Let's talk about Road America, and then we'll get into some of these teams and the breakdowns of where they're at now after a few weeks of racing, though. But coming up next, Road America, 8 days.
I'll tell you what, Road America, that is the classic road circuit on the circuit. I mean, it's 4 miles, a lot of open. It tests all the things that the car has. There's slow, medium, fast corners, a lot of places to overtake. I'd say of the tracks that road courses that is out there, that's the one I'd say I look forward to most them running because that is a driver's track. I think you can't just say the best car wins there. I'd say the best driver will win that event. That's why I'd say this would be a prime circuit for a guy like, say, an Alexander Rossi. If he is going to make a run for a championship, if this would be the prime place for him to get a run going and possibly win a race here and get, some momentum going for him where the momentum's not been on his side, at least over the last couple of races where he's had opportunities to seal the deal and has not taken advantage of it.
Do you think that we have a Rookie of the Year already decided, and then that's Colton Herta? And do you think there's somewhat of a friendly rivalry? And I say friendly because...
No, I don't. I think right now, based on what I'm seeing, I think you could make a case that Santino Ferrucci is more deserving of that. I mean, he's now 9th in the point standings. He is finally showing the consistency and maturity that he did not have at the start of the season, at the end of last year when he ran the limited number of runs. I'd say right now, and yes, you don't go necessarily by one race. I think it's the whole package. And right now, I think you can make a serious case that the man that deserves that Rookie of the Year honor is Santino Ferrucci if he keeps this going of consistency where he stays in the top 10 in points. Now, granted, Colton Herta has had mechanical problems get in his way, but over-aggressive move at Texas, I think that was a very poor decision on his part that unfortunately almost wiped out Rossi. It took a miracle slide by Rossi to avoid getting involved in that crash late in the Texas race. But I'd say right now, if you look at the information, I'd say you are more inclined to give that Rookie of the Year honor right now to Ferrucci and not to Colton Herta at this point. Now, granted, that may not be a popular view, but look who's higher in points right now. It's not even close. Ferrucci is up to P9, and I think is Colton Herta even in the top half of the point stands? I don't believe he is at this point.
I don't have the standings up right now, but I was getting ready to go there. But yeah, we can look at that here in just a moment, sir. I will pull up the standings here.
Yeah, I believe last time I checked, Ferrucci is higher in points by a good amount, I believe.
We'll get that pulled up here in just a minute, and we'll be able to answer that question. My other part of the Colton Herta question was, do you think there's a friendly rivalry forming between Scott Dixon and Colton Herta?
I wouldn't say rivalry right now because it was just one race, but if it continues, then I'd say something might be on the cards there, but I think more data is needed before you can make a claim like that at this point.
All right, well, let's kind of get through some of these drivers here as we'll start with some of the top 5 overall. We'll get to your point question on Ferrucci here in just a moment. Joseph Newgarden, obviously leading the pack, got a championship in his sight. So does Alexander Rossi, and I honestly believe Simon Pagenaud, he's in it to win it. What are your thoughts on those 3 drivers?
Well, Pagenaud's kind of fizzed out since the Indy triumph, and obviously taking the thing of that and then having that on this is an extra burden that he's got to deal with right now, and I'm wondering how he's going to handle that. But so far, I don't think he's handled it to the best of his ability as of yet. Now, that'll change over time, hopefully, and he'll get back into it, but he certainly hasn't helped himself in the last 3 events. Right now, I'd say it's a 2-man fight for the title unless Scott Dixon can get going. I think it's either Rossi or Newgarden for the title. I'd say right now, if you go by what's going on right now, Newgarden, but if you go by potential, I think Rossi is the guy that's going to win the title if he plays to his potential.
You think Rossi's is the champion this year? Is that what you said?
Sorry, if you go by potential, Rossi's the guy. If you go by what's going on right now, you go with Newgarden. But if you go by what could happen down the road or should happen, the writing on the wall says Rossi is the guy to beat.
It's a little bit closer than what you may have thought with the point standings. The Colton Herta is at 158, and Ferrucci is at 193. So there's a gap there, but it's not a huge gap. It's not a large gap. between the two rookies there. Obviously, Joseph Newgarden with 367, Alexander Rossi 342, Scott Dixon, and then Soto, Will Powell, Ryan Hunter-Reay, Graham Rahal,